Hey there guys, my name's Labo, but you already knew that because you're so darn perfect. Thank you so much for your patience. Things have been crazy for me in the real world, and so yeah, just once again, thank you so much for your patience between content, you know. But things have slowed down, and I finally got a game that I could stomach enough to finish. This week I'm reviewing Soul Searching by kayabros, or kayabros. I don't know. It's for the Nintendo Switch though. To keep things honest, I will be giving this game away as per usual, so make sure to hit up the description below for your chance to win. All right, let's get going. Yeah, first impressions are always the bane of my existence. After Valfaris, I honestly should never again base anything heavily off visuals. This title in particular was developed by one person over 3 years. One person. Now we all know that this means that visually we aren't going to get anything crazy, but story and personality wise, well, some of these titles are unmatched. This is really a shame because the game's visuals are the biggest anchor on the potential of this title, and I just mean that for the story mode. This game seems most concerned with delivering a narrative first and foremost, but we'll get to that in a moment. The characters in this game are, primarily blocky. I'm not saying that this should be expected though. If you remember, Cave Story? But I digress. In the main game, the game takes you to various islands, each of which is pretty nice. However, between each of these is more water than you'll ever want to see in your life. Interestingly though, there are things within the title that aren't block-based, like there are dragons, sea creatures, fish, and more. What's more, the game sports a side mode called Short Stories that features quite a few different graphical styles as well as gameplay styles. Yeah. But once again, more on that later. There really isn't a whole lot to talk about here. Sorry, it's just super simplistic, visually. Not super impressed, not at all. Okay, so if I'm being completely honest, I had no idea what this title was really about until about an hour into it. You get the sense that the title is about something. You just don't really know which direction the game is going for a while. That's one of my main complaints about this game. It really seems like it wants to be about something, really deep, but it never really seems to pick a lane. I don't usually run into this issue with indie games. For the most part, because of the creative freedom that a lot of indies have, we get to see some amazing storylines and messages. There is no way a AAA company would have greenlit, the premise of Oxenfree for one of its, tentpole titles. See, there are a lot of indie games in recent history that deal with mental health. So many so that it's kind of getting a little dull. I really do advocate for the discussion of that, in this medium. I think it's great, but if you're gonna do it, at least in this point in time, you have to do something new with it. Unfortunately for this title, I've seen pretty much everything this game has to offer in some way before. That doesn't mean that the story is bad. It's about 2 to 3 hours long depending on how you choose to get through it. So it's gone way before it ever, outstays its welcome. I really don't want to say too much because there is barely anything I can say without spoiling the whole thing. In concept, the game is about taking care of oneself, at least I think. I mean, there are other notes in there about dealing with depression and loss, at least I think. The first one I mentioned, self-care, seems to be the overarching theme, which is something I haven't seen too much of. Pacing-wise, it takes some strange chances. It takes a flashback approach, where the story about your character is given at different intervals within the gameplay. Is it good? It's compelling. It makes you want to get to the end just to find out what all the flashbacks mean, and I can't fault the game for its brevity. I mean, look at Journey. That title was able to run you through an entire gamut of emotions within 2 hours, and I adore that game. But Soul Searching, I don't know that it accomplishes the same thing. Sometimes I feel like the title is too far up its own butt with euphemisms and metaphors, and because of this, it hardly says anything. Like, there are dragons, right? And the dragons are a huge part of the title's narrative. But my goodness, I can't tell you what they're analogous for. Like, they're clearly analogous for something. See, I'm sure it's something simple, and I probably just missed it, but each island within the game means something. There are multiple islands and such, and they don't all lend a hand to the game's main theme. Like, there's maybe 2 islands that do. The others, yeah, they definitely exist to talk about things like anxiety, religious perspectives, coping, the works. which I mean, in concept sounds amazing, but this is where the game's length hurts it. You never spend enough time on any of these islands to feel the weight of anything they're working through. What I will say is that once you get some bits about your character's history, it honestly does pick up a bit. Then and only then did I feel compelled to finish the story. So, gameplay? Whew. Where do I start with this one? It's a survival game, at least that's what it calls itself. I mean, it has depleting meters, so I guess that's what makes it a survival game. If you're looking for a game with tons of crafting and micromanaging, you're gonna need to go somewhere else for that. This one is as straightforward as it comes. There are 3 meters: hunger, thirst, and energy, and those are all you manage. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the game rarely ever tries to kill you. There is no combat in this at all. All you have to do is keep those bars from depleting and you can complete the story. It's another game whose gameplay is simply a method for delivering its narrative, kind of like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. Now, here's the thing. That isn't bad. It's the exact opposite of the game I covered last time, Valfaris. This game wants you to absorb its message, and it gives you a pretty simplistic gameplay style in order to make sure that you are invested and want to keep going. But if I'm speaking frankly, and I have been this whole time, it seems as though almost any type of gameplay could have worked for this. Like, I could easily see this narrative playing out as a platformer or even a beat 'em up, if need be. So let's talk about their mechanics. You start the game off on your home island with a very simple raft. Your goal is to sail from island to island until the end. You can stop at each island to get supplies, buy bigger and better rafts, you know, the works. You can also buy things for your raft like rudders and engines, but only if your raft is big enough. Now, you know how I said that the game has way too much water? Well, thankfully, as long as you are rowing in one direction, the game will speed up in order to keep you from, you know, getting too bored. At least as long as you have either a rudder or can access both oars simultaneously, which I found out the hard way. Yeah, there are no tutorials, which I kind of like. It's nice to, you know, be able to figure out things for yourself. There are 3 types of objects in the water, though. You can pick up coins by swimming in the water. You can pick up what I can only call souls or soul points. They allow you to use magic so that you can use different effects within the title. You can find these powers by visiting various places, including smaller islands. I only unlocked 2 on my journey, but I'm sure there are more. I just didn't feel compelled to explore all that much because the sailing got really tedious at one point. In the water, there are also fish. You can fish off your boat, and catching them is extremely simple. You can then sell the fish for money, and this is far more, you know, effective a method for getting money than swimming around for coins. Honestly, if I could offer any advice, get a boat that lets you fish as quickly as you can and hard grind fishing and sell those suckers so you can buy each upgrade as quickly as possible. Except for the binoculars, those suck. And just like that, as quickly as it begins, it's over. I mentioned before that there is a side mode. This mode is very experimental seeming, and I almost wish that the main game had been explored more this way. Short Stories, as it's dubbed, is a collection of short games that aim to tell one story. Some are more engaging than others, though, which is to be expected. There's a basketball story that I find to be the most intriguing. It's just 2 kids playing basketball. The game has its own mechanics for actual basketball, you know, gameplay, but all the while the 2 boys are talking, and they talk like, you know, kids do. There's nothing overly, you know, heavy about the conversation, just some banter about crushes and pressure. But I mean, that was the beauty of it. I hate to say it, but I think I found this section to be quite a bit more entertaining than the main campaign. The games get really weird in places, and I think it works a lot of the time. Sometimes they feel uncomfortable, sometimes they feel lighthearted, and this is, you know, a proper way of delivering multiple messages. Give each social issue its own gameplay style. I think that's really fascinating. I would love to see this concept fleshed out more. Maybe in a sequel or something, I don't know. Overall, I think the gameplay is just fine in practice. I'm a little disappointed that the gameplay left very little to be remembered in the story mode, but the title made up for it a lot in short stories. This is a game that I think has some potential. I believe that some earnest refocusing could make this one of those games to remember, at least within the genre. I know that there is something within this title that needs to be heard by someone, though. The problem is that it just all seems so confused about its messaging. It might just be too broad. And I wish I could go more into what I mean by that, but I really can't because I don't want to spoil it. I honestly do want other people to play this title just so I can hear what they have to say about it. It seems like that type of game that, you know, you get together with people and say, oh, what did you think about this part, you know? It's strange. When I initially completed the game, I was actually pretty pleased with it. And then I realized that my character's story honestly only took about 4 minutes to tell. That's 4 minutes in a 3-hour journey. It's a game I think you have to replay because there are definitely narrative bits that are callbacks, but they sometimes get lost in the points the game is trying to make about certain matters of mental health. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe in art for art's sake. I also believe that you shouldn't have to compromise your message just because someone doesn't get it. For all I know, this could be the single most profound message in a video game ever, but it just feels buried to me, and that's a shame. So today I'll be giving Soul Searching a C. There's something really alluring about the side story section. It almost feels like it should be its own game. Maybe we'll see more from this dev. I'm really looking forward to the idea. I really want to see that idea fleshed out. But until then, stay perfect.